Once upon a time, in a small village called Yumuro, there was a young man named Matsi. He lived with his mother in a humble hut. The hut was very old and small, left behind by Matsi's father when he went to join the ancestors. Matsi and his mother were poor. Every day, Matsi would go to the market to sell beads. These beads were very beautiful, but the money he earned from selling them was very little. It was so little that sometimes there wasn't enough food for him and his mother. Matsi's childhood friends had grown up and become wealthy men. They had large houses, wives, and children. But Matsi was different. He was still poor, still living in the small hut, and still all alone. His friends didn't visit him anymore because they were busy with their own lives. Every morning, Matsi would wake up, put on his old clothes, and head to the market. He hoped that one day things would get better, but day after day, everything remained the same. Matsi stayed poor, and his heart grew heavier with sadness. And so, the days went by in the small village of Yumuro, with Matsi selling his beads and dreaming of a better life, but nothing seemed to change. One bright morning, Matsi was on his way to the market as he always did. He was carrying a large basket full of beads on his head. The road was dusty, and Matsi was lost in thought, wondering how he could make enough money to feed himself and his mother. Suddenly, Matsi's foot hit a big stone on the road. He tripped and fell hard to the ground. The basket of beads flew off his head, and all the beads scattered everywhere. Matsi was shocked and embarrassed. The villagers nearby saw what happened, and instead of helping him, they started to laugh. They pointed at him and whispered among themselves, "Look at him," one of the women said, "still selling beads like a woman. All his mates are rich, and here he is, poor and miserable." Matsi's face turned red with shame. He quickly got up and began picking up the beads from the ground, but the more he picked them up, the more he heard the villagers laughing and mocking him. Every word they said felt like a heavy stone on his heart. Finally, Matsi gathered all the beads and put them back in his basket. With his head down, he walked to the market, but the laughter and the cruel words kept echoing in his mind. Even when he reached the market and set up his small stall, Matsi couldn't forget how embarrassed and sad he felt. The whole day, his heart was heavy, and he couldn't smile or talk to anyone. Matsi felt very alone, and the sadness stayed with him long after the sun had set. Matsi was going through a tough time, earning very little money from selling his beads. Often, the money he earned wasn't enough to feed him and his mother, so Matsi had to borrow money from some people in the village just to survive. One day, Matsi borrowed some money from his friend Kai. Kai loved money more than anything and never liked to wait when someone owed him. Matsi promised to pay Kai back in a few days, but when the day came, he didn't have enough money to pay. Early in the morning, before the sun was fully up, Kai went straight to Matsi's little stall in the market. He didn't wait for Matsi to open his stall. He started shouting loudly, "Matsi, where is my money? Pay me now." His voice was so loud that all the other traders and people in the market heard him. Matsi was just setting up his stall when he saw Kai and knew he was in trouble. He begged Kai, saying, "Please, give me a little more time. I will pay you soon, I promise." But Kai was very angry. He didn't care about Matsi's troubles. He was so angry that he slapped Matsi right there in front of everyone. The slap was loud, and Matsi's cheek burned with pain. The people in the market were shocked to see how sad and helpless Matsi looked. Some of them felt sorry for him. A few kind traders came over and gave Matsi a little money to help him pay Kai back. Matsi was very grateful, but inside he felt so small and ashamed. After paying Kai, Matsi sat quietly at his stall. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The day went by slowly, and Matsi's heart was heavy with sadness and frustration. He couldn't understand why life was so hard for him. He was tired of being poor and tired of being treated so harshly by others. That day, Matsi went home feeling more hopeless than ever. Matsi had reached a point where he couldn't take it anymore. He was tired of being poor, tired of people looking down on him. One day, he decided to visit his childhood friend, Nedu. Nedu was now a rich man, respected by everyone in the village. Matsi hoped that maybe Nedu could help him. Matsi walked to Nedu's big house, and when he arrived, he knocked on the door, feeling nervous. Nedu opened the door and saw Matsi standing there, but instead of welcoming him, Nedu looked at Matsi's old clothes and dirty shoes. Nedu didn't even shake Matsi's hand and said, "I don't want your poverty to rub off on me." Matsi felt a deep shame in his heart, but he swallowed his pride and explained to Nedu why he had come. "Nedu, I want to be rich like you. I'm tired of being poor. Please help me." Nedu looked at Matsi for a moment and then said, "If you're really ready to do anything, I can help you. But remember, no one should ever know where your money comes from." Nedu's words were serious, and Matsi felt a chill run down his spine, but he was desperate. Nedu then reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He handed the money to Matsi and said, "This is just the beginning, but be careful, Matsi. Once you start, there's no turning back. Matsi took the money, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He thanked Nedu, although his heart was heavy with the weight of Nedu's warning. As he left Nedu's house, Matsi couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. But for now, he was happy. He had money in his pocket and thought that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to change for him. In the days that followed, Matsi felt a new energy taking over him. With the money Nedu gave him, he was able to buy more beads and materials to make more elaborate and beautiful pieces. His small business in the market began to grow, and people started to notice. Who would have thought that Matsi would finally get lucky, the villagers would say. Everything seemed to be falling into place for him. But was it really? Or was the path he was on more dangerous than he could imagine? Matsi felt on top of the world. For the first time in a long time, he and his mother had plenty to eat. He went back to the market, bought new types of food, and even some new clothes. His mother, though happy to see her son a bit more prosperous, couldn't help but worry. "My son, where is all this money coming from?" she would ask. And Matsi, still avoiding the truth, would reply with the same nervous smile, "The gods have smiled upon me, Mama." But were they really smiling? How many times have you wondered if your choices are leading you down the right path? Matsi was determined to move forward, even though he felt a growing unease inside him. He returned to Nedu's house, now with a bit more confidence, but still with a heavy heart. Nedu greeted him with a smile, but his cold eyes showed that there was no friendship there, just business. "Are you ready for the next step, Matsi?" Nedu asked, and before Matsi could answer, he continued, "Are you willing to do whatever it takes to be truly rich? And you, how far would you go to achieve your goals?" Matsi swallowed hard. He was determined, but he still didn't know what Nedu expected of him. So, without thinking too much, he replied, "Yes, I'm ready." Nedu then took Matsi to a man known as the chief priest, a man feared by everyone in the village for his mysterious powers. The priest looked at Matsi with a piercing gaze, as if he could see straight into his soul. "I see a bright future for you, but you must be prepared to do whatever it takes," said the priest. What Matsi didn't know was that this path to riches was covered in shadows and sacrifices. The priest then asked Matsi to bring 2 white roosters. "We will perform a ritual," he said, "and after that, your journey to wealth will begin." Matsi's heart beat faster. He was afraid but determined. Did he really know what he was getting into? The next day, Matsi brought the roosters, as requested. The ritual was performed on a dark night, with smoke from incense and strange words being uttered by the priest. The atmosphere was eerie, and Matsi felt a mix of excitement and fear. The next morning, when he woke up, he found 2 bundles of money beside his bed, exactly as the priest had said. Matsi's heart raced with joy. But what had he really gained? And what would he still have to lose? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you seemed to have everything you wanted, but felt that something was wrong? In the days that followed, Matsi invested in his business, expanded his stall in the market, and soon became one of the most well-known vendors in Yumaro. His new prosperity caught the attention of many, including those who used to laugh at him. But what people didn't know was that this wealth came at a very high price. Every night, Matsi woke up in a cold sweat, his dreams disturbed by images of shadows and sacrifices. Was he really prepared to pay this price? Even so, he continued. Greed had already taken over his heart, and he wanted more. More money, more recognition, more power. So, he went back to the priest. This time, the priest looked at him more seriously and said, "If you truly want to be rich, you must make one last sacrifice." What could be more difficult than what he had already done? When the priest revealed what was needed, Matsi felt his entire body tremble. "You must bring the heart of someone who shares your blood," said the priest, his voice as cold as the night. Matsi's world seemed to collapse. He had no brothers or sisters. Only his mother. He knew what that meant. What would you do if you were in Matsi's place? Would you risk everything for what you believe is wealth, even knowing the cost is immeasurable? For the next 3 days, Matsi could barely sleep. He saw his mother preparing their meals with care, looked at her tired face, marked by years of sacrifice and love. How could he do this? But, on the other hand, the fear of losing everything he had gained and, worse, of losing his sanity, was overwhelming. He was at an impasse. His mind swirled like a whirlpool of despair. On the 3rd night, with his heart crushed by the dilemma, Matsi made the decision that would forever change the course of his life. He got out of bed, walked silently to his mother's room, and with tears streaming down his face, did what the priest had ordered. The room was silent, broken only by Matsi's sobs. With his mother's heart in a calabash, he ran to the priest's shrine. He hoped that, after this terrible act, he would finally find the peace and wealth he had so desperately sought. But when he arrived at the shrine, the sight that awaited him was even more disturbing. The priest was lying on the ground, lifeless. And you, have you ever done something that, in the end, wasn't worth it? Despair took over Matsi. He had lost the only person who truly cared about him, and now everything was over. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and finally realized how high the price of his ambition had been. What had he gained? Nothing. Only emptiness and sorrow. The news spread quickly through the village. People were horrified to learn what Matsi had done. And even more so, to learn that Nedu, the man everyone admired for his wealth, was also involved in terrible practices. The elders, in their wisdom, decided that Nedu should be expelled from the village, along with his family, stripped of all their wealth. As for Matsi, he would be sent to the forest, where he would live alone with his pain and remorse. Do you think the punishment was fair? Or did Matsi deserve another chance? As Matsi was led to the forest, he couldn't help but wonder, where did I go wrong? Has my greed blinded me this much? With every step he took, the weight of his choice seemed to grow. And at the same time, he knew that this was his new reality. He was alone, lost in the darkness he had created. The villagers buried his mother with great respect, and the story of Matsi and his thoughtless choice became a lesson for everyone. The elders established a new law: no one could visit the shrine without the king's approval. They wanted to ensure that no one else would be seduced by the dark path that Matsi and Nedu had followed. And so, the village of Yumaro returned to its peace, but Matsi's story continued to be told for generations, as a reminder of the dangers of greed and the blind desire for wealth. And you, what did you learn from this story? How far would you go to achieve your goals? Is it worth sacrificing everything that is important just to get what you desire? If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, share what you learned in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.